thank God they made me come into work because, with carbon monoxide poisoning, the more air you get, the more it starts to flush from your system. So as a firefighter, especially an actor portraying a firefighter, you're always doing something physical. You're rappelling down, you're running, you're working yourself out, and you're flushing yourself. So by the end of the day, I was feeling pretty good. I thought, well, maybe I don't have the flu. I'd go home and then it'd start the whole cycle again. And the only thing that was saving my life was the fact that my window, I'm claustrophobic, so a window has to be open somewhere in my house. Well, that window happened to be right above my bed. So it was just keeping me alive. And then one night I came home on a Friday night and I turned on the thing. I was feeling pretty good. Within about an hour, I was feeling like crap again. And I said, you know something? I'm never going to get better as long as that window's open. Thump.
There are television programs that entertain. There are television programs that endure. And then, very rarely, there are television programs that actually change the world, that reach beyond the screen and into the fabric of real life in ways that nobody anticipated, that save lives that would otherwise have been lost, that shift the entire course of how a society looks after its most vulnerable people in their most desperate moments. Emergency, the NBC action drama that ran through the 1970s, was that third kind of program. And at the center of it, goofy, gallant, completely irreplaceable at the center of it, was Randolph Mantooth. Randolph Mantooth has died. He was 80 years old. The news was confirmed by his brother, Donald Mantooth, who told reporters that Randolph had passed away at a hospice facility in Ventura, California. He had been unwell for a number of years, Donald said, and had grown progressively thinner as time went on. It was a gentle end in its way, for a man whose life had been defined by movement and energy and an almost restless commitment to the work he loved. The entertainment world is mourning. The firefighting and paramedic community, a community that has particular reason to feel the weight of this loss, is mourning. And the countless millions of people across America who grew up watching Johnny Gage race toward danger with quiet competence and an easy grin are mourning alongside them. Because Johnny Gage was more than a character. He was, in a very real and documentable sense, a catalyst for change on a scale that very few fictional creations in the history of television have ever managed to match. Randolph DeRoy Mantooth was born on the 19th of September 1945 in Sacramento, California. His childhood was unusual in ways that would shape the man he became. His father, Buck, was a pipeline construction engineer, and the nature of that work meant the family was perpetually on the move. By the time Randolph turned 18, he had lived in 24 different states. 24. It is the kind of biographical detail that sounds almost too cinematic to be true, and yet it illuminates so much about how he developed the ease with social situations that comes from having had to forge new friendships constantly. The interior life that flourishes when you are always the new arrival and never quite rooted anywhere. He said it himself with characteristic directness. He was never in any town long enough to cultivate lasting relationships, so he lived in his own little fantasy world. That fantasy world, it would turn out, was one of the most generative places an actor could possibly inhabit. His mother, Sadie, was a waitress, and after she and Buck divorced, she made her children a promise, a car for each of them, when they graduated high school. She kept it. It is the kind of small story that says something large about the values Mantooth grew up with. Dependability, follow through, doing what you say you will do. He discovered acting at San Marcos High School in Santa Barbara, more or less by accident in the way that so many of the best discoveries happen, and found in it something that fit. He followed friends to Santa Barbara City College and then made the significant leap to New York's American Academy of Dramatic Arts, where he formalized the name that had always felt slightly too casual for the craft he was pursuing and became Randolph, more serious, more considered, more befitting a man who was beginning to understand what he was actually capable of. It was the legendary Universal talent scout Eleanor Kilgallen who first recognized the full weight of what Mantooth could do. She saw him on stage in Philadelphia, Here I Come, a production in which he shared a Best Actor award with Brad Davis. No small company to be keeping, and knew immediately that she was watching someone who needed to be in front of a camera. She brought him to Los Angeles in 1970, signed to a Universal contract, and set in motion a chain of events that would define not just his career, but the emergency medical landscape of an entire nation. The crucial moment came in 1971. Producer Robert A. Sinider, working alongside the legendary Dragnet creator Jack Webb, was developing Emergency, a drama centered on the Los Angeles County Fire Department's newly formed paramedic units. He needed the right person to carry the show. He found that person not through a formal audition, but through a scene Mantooth had filmed with Hal Holbrook on an NBC drama called The Bold Ones, The Senator, in which his character broke down during courtroom testimony. Senator watched it and, by Mantooth's own account, simply said, "That is my Johnny Gage." What nobody involved in the early production fully grasped was just how consequential that casting decision would prove to be. When Mantooth was told he would be playing a paramedic, his first response was entirely honest and entirely revealing. "What the hell is a paramedic?" he asked. It was not a stupid question. At that time, there were only a handful of paramedic units operating anywhere in the state of California. The concept of trained emergency medical personnel bringing hospital-grade intervention directly to the scene of an accident or a medical crisis, rather than simply loading a patient into an ambulance and hoping for the best on the journey to hospital, was so new as to be almost theoretical. Most Americans had no idea such a thing existed. They were about to find out. Emergency premiered in January 1972, and what followed over the next several years is one of the most remarkable case studies in the cultural and social power of television ever recorded. When the show went to air, there were precisely 12 paramedic units operating across the whole of North America. 12. Within 3 years of the show's debut, 46 states had enacted legislation allowing paramedics to practice emergency medicine. Within a decade, more than half of all Americans lived within 10 minutes of a paramedic rescue unit. Experts who have studied this transformation are unambiguous about the cause. That growth, they say, simply would not have occurred without emergency. The show did not merely reflect a change that was already happening. It drove the change. It created the public awareness and political will that made the change possible. Mantooth himself understood the magnitude of it and spoke about it with a humility that felt entirely genuine rather than performed. "When you take life-saving services out of the hospital and into the field," he said, "the number of lives saved is incalculable." He knew what the alternative version of his career might have looked like. He made the point himself, with a lightness of touch that was very much his own, noting that he could have been remembered for driving a car with a name like the General Lee. Instead, he was remembered for something that changed emergency medicine forever. "How lucky can any one person be?" he asked. It was a question he clearly meant. The show itself ran for 6 seasons, from 1972 through to 1977, and then extended its life through 7 television films, and even a Saturday morning animated series. Mantooth played Johnny Gage opposite Kevin Tighe as his partner Roy DeSoto, a pairing that became one of the defining double acts of 70s American television. The two men were, by Mantooth's own description, very much in the same boat, young, relatively inexperienced, finding their feet alongside seasoned performers like Robert Fuller, Julie London, and Bobby Troup. The camaraderie on screen was matched by genuine friendship off it. They shared the same agent. They shared a motorhome throughout the entire run. T was the best man at Mantooth's wedding in 2002. When Mantooth's ranch was engulfed by fire in 1978, he raced home to find Tej already there, getting the animals to safety. The friendship was, in the most uncomplicated and old-fashioned sense, real. The approach they brought to the work was equally serious. Senator drilled into his cast a principle that Mantooth carried with him for the rest of his career. You could be funny, he told them. Humor was welcome. But the moment the station alarm sounded, funny was left at the door. From that point on, you were a professional. They trained with the fire department. They learned to insert intravenous lines. They took their paramedic education with full seriousness, and the audience felt it. The authenticity was not incidental to the show's success. It was the engine of it. Every rescue depicted on screen had to have been carried out in real-life writers, combed through firefighters' actual logs for storylines. This was not drama that played fast and loose with the realities it was representing. After Emergency concluded, Mantooth continued working with the steady, unpretentious commitment of a man who simply loved his profession and had no particular interest in stopping. He joined the cast of the ABC comedy Operation Petticoat, appeared in Detective School, and worked on the HBO miniseries The Seekers. He guest starred across an impressive range of television: Battlestar Galactica, Charlie's Angels, The Fall Guy, Diagnosis Murder, Sons of Anarchy. He spent time on the New York soap opera Loving, playing Clay Alden and later Alex Masters, returning to the role twice across different years. He stepped in on As the World Turns to play Hal Munson following the death of the actor who had originated the role. He kept working. He kept showing up. In 2012, he and Kevin Tighe were named honorary fire chiefs by the Los Angeles County Fire Department. It was an honor that carried genuine meaning, not the symbolic kind that is handed out as a formality, but the kind that comes from an institution recognizing that two people change the public understanding of what that institution does and why it matters. Mantooth spoke in later years about the personal debt he felt toward the emergency medical services he had spent so much of his career representing. In the 1970s, paramedics had saved his own life after identifying carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty furnace in his home. In the 1980s, emergency personnel had brought his sister back from the brink after a serious car accident. "Do I respect paramedics? Do I respect firefighters?" he said, his voice catching. "There's a debt I owe them that I probably can't ever pay back, but I'm going to try." He spent his whole career trying, and in the most meaningful measure of what trying looks like, he succeeded. Randolph Mantooth is survived by his brother, Donald, and his sister, Tanya. He was 80 years old. He was an actor, a television icon, and in the most direct and literal sense, a man whose work helped save lives that would otherwise have ended too soon. Somewhere tonight, an ambulance is moving fast through a dark street towards someone who needs help. The person inside it, trained, equipped, ready, is part of a system that was built in no small part by a television program and by the man at the heart of it. That is a legacy that does not dim. That is a legacy that runs in the blood of a nation.